Hello, you're watching Global Insight, where we speak to experts from around the world on issues making headlines. I'm Also Young. Now, Merriam-Webster dictionary has named gaslighting its word of the year. Online searches for the word on its website grew by over 1,700% in 2022, according to the company. And gaslighting means to mislead someone, especially for one's own advantage, according to the dictionary. And the word has been popping up in everyday conversation, even in music, dramas, and even politics these days. And it's deemed to be a psychological manipulation, even abuse. So what does the fact that the word is being so heavily used every day really say about the world that we live in today? For this, we connect with Robin Stern, co-founder and associate director of Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence, and David Smith, professor of philosophy at the University of New England. A very warm welcome to you both. Well, my first question to you, Dr. Stern. Now, where did this term gaslighting come from, and why is it that we're hearing it so often these days?
Thank you for the question, and thank you for having me. So gaslighting came from originally, the phrase originated from a 1938 mystery thriller that was made into a movie in 1944 starring Ingrid Bergman and Charles Boyer, where the adoring wife was manipulated by her diabolical husband, who moved things around in their house, who tried to convince her that she was crazy and that her perceptions were off. And he undermined her reality for most of the movie until the point where she then believed that maybe she was going crazy.
I see. And Dr. Smith, what's your perspective on this? Why has gaslighting become such a widespread social buzzword and phenomenon?
Well, it's a catchy term, right? And I think that it's become prominent largely because it's a term to reproach people with. So if we don't agree with the perspective of others, it's tempting to regard them as undermining our capacity as thinkers. And that's what gaslighting is, right? When you gaslight someone, you undermine their credibility as a thinker and a knower.
And Dr. Stern, well, why do people gaslight? I mean, are certain people more inclined to become gaslighters? I mean, what's really behind the psychology of these people?
So people are not born gaslighters. From my perspective as a clinician and from what I've seen through the years, people learn the behavior of gaslighting. They witness it, they've experienced it, or they sometimes happen into it. And gaslighters do gaslighting to control the moment, to deflect responsibility, to get out of an uncomfortable situation.
And Dr. Stern, well, what really sets it apart from simply lying? Because, you know, there's lying, but what makes gaslighting especially so manipulative, I suppose?
Gaslighting is intended to sow seeds of doubt and to undermine the gaslightee. So it's intended to take a bite out of the way you think about things, to undermine your confidence in the way you are in the world, your self-esteem, your character, your perceptions.
And Dr. Smith, well, does social media and perhaps the lack of offline engagement that we're seeing these days, does it make the younger generations then a bit more susceptible to gaslighting and being gaslighted?
Yeah, I'm not sure of that. Actually, I want to agree with Dr. Stein that gaslighting is an effort to reduce a person's confidence in their own perceptions and their own thinking. And if we think of it that way, it's very, very different from simply disagreeing with them, right? So I might have a different perception from you, and I might explain that, and I might say that I think your perception is incorrect. But if I'm gaslighting you, I am deliberately trying to undermine your confidence in yourself as a knower. Now, with respect to social media, I'm really not sure, because this process of undermining, I think, happens most effectively in a one-to-one situation. What we find on social media is an inclination to throw around the accusation of gaslighting. We reproach others for gaslighting when we have a different perspective than they do. But that's not, in my understanding, what gaslighting should be understood as.
Right, so that was actually my next question to you, Dr. Smith. Do you think perhaps the term is being used a bit too liberally, I suppose, these days? We just hear it basically in everyday conversations. I mean, I actually haven't really heard of the term until this year, so the dictionary there, stats must be correct.
Yeah, no, I think it is. I think it's very useful to be really specific and particular about this. And I should say, before going on, that I was a clinician before transitioning to philosophy. I was just a psychotherapist. And yeah, I think that we need to distinguish gaslighting from disagreement, from seeing things differently, one person to the next, or from a person who is simply deluded about reality. Gaslighting is an intentional project of undermining the perception and thinking of others.
Right, and I think most people have experienced this to some extent in various contexts. And, well, Dr. Stern, what are some common phrases that individuals who gaslight might use?
You're too sensitive. Feeling paranoid today? Wouldn't be the first time. Everyone agrees with me. You don't know how to think straight. There is something seriously wrong with you. It's your fault. Why do you keep denying me? You're very creative and you have a great imagination, but you can't think about things as clearly as other people. Don't you know that? No, I never said that. Really? You're just being way, way too sensitive. I don't know why you're making such a big deal out of this. I asked for that yesterday. I don't know what you were thinking, but keeping your timeline straight is not one of your strengths. Perhaps you need a few days to de-stress if you're having so much trouble, in fact, keeping your deadlines. Did you actually train to be a professional?
Oh, well, those are very biting words, and yes, I think I have heard some of them before, but what is the impact really on people who have been subject to gaslighting?
It's really interesting and an important question. It's interesting that you asked me that, because yesterday when I was doing a webinar, I asked people to close their eyes and notice how they were feeling while I was reading a series of gaslighting statements. And at the end of that activity, people all said that they felt heavier, worse, upset, anxious, undermined, even if they weren't actually the target in the moment. The impact can be devastating. People have described it as soul-destroying. Certainly, the reason I wrote The Gaslight Effect and coined the term years ago was because I was very interested in the impact that gaslighting was having on people over time. And I noticed that people were not their same strong self. People reported feeling less than the person they wanted to be. Shaky sense of self. As we've been talking about during this interview, a lack of confidence in the way they think, second guessing themselves all the time, and just feeling terrible about who they are and how they show up and how they can perform and how they can relate.
And then, Dr. Stern, then how would that then affect the way we engage in our relationships or even in the workplace?
It's an extra burden, psychological burden on us, because we're overcoming something that we feel is wrong with us, we're always apologizing. We're often avoiding conversations. We're often isolating ourselves. We're not really able to engage authentically. People feel a lot of shame when they're in a gaslighting relationship, and so they're not really willing to talk about what's going on with themselves much of the time. And of course, it varies. Individuals connect in different ways, and people have different strengths. People connect with each other in different strengths of relationships. And if you're close to someone, it may impact you less because you'll let them in. But if you're not, you may keep your distance.
And Dr. Stone, can you become addicted to gaslighting? I mean, if once you start gaslighting, do you tend to continue doing it, I suppose?
I would say addicted would not be the word I would use, but I think that you can become pretty comfortable that that's going to work. And you can continue to do it because you've noticed that it works. If you can stop someone in their tracks when they're trying to put you on the spot, or even they're just asking you a question like, where were you last night? And you can respond by saying, there you go again, you're so paranoid. And that stops them. You never have to answer the question. So you can become really confident in and comfortable with getting out of a tight spot, being a gaslighter.
Well, Dr. Smith, we're seeing the word gaslighting being applied in various political and social contexts outside, relationships. So, well, how damaging is this to society?
I think it's a term that's thrown around very easily. And I think it's useful to distinguish gaslighting from other sort of nearby phenomena. So gaslighting is not the same as simply deceiving others. Gaslighting is not the same as disagreeing with others about the nature of reality. We all have such disagreements. And I think part of the popularity of the term is its usefulness as an accusation to others, and perhaps less as an analytical term to help us understand what's going on between others.
And Dr. Smith, we've been seeing politicians really throw around this word, and I mean, should that really be the case, though? I mean, we're looking to these people for, political, social, and perhaps even moral leadership at times.
Yeah, well, I think we should be much more cautious about looking to politicians for moral leadership in particular. Politicians are experts in selling themselves. And successful politicians know what works. They know what buttons to push. And if accusations of gaslighting does that, then skillful politicians will pick that up and they will use it for their own benefit and perhaps to the detriment of you and me.
I see. And Dr. Stern, well, how do people really recover from gaslighting if they've had a really bad and even traumatic experience?
I would say that first, it's very difficult. And people need to have a lot of patience with themselves. People need to regard themselves with compassion. And trusting yourself, taking back your reality, can only happen in small steps. Often it's a long process of saying to yourself, this feels comfortable or this doesn't feel comfortable. I like this, I'm going to do it again. Don't like this, I'm not going to do it again, until you begin to rely again on the way you see the world and what you can trust and what you can't. Giving affirmations to yourself, hanging out with people who love you, care about you, think well of you, noticing your accomplishments, noticing the successes you have every day. I would say that that would be a good start. And most importantly, becoming really skilled at checking in with your feelings and noticing when you're not comfortable, trusting that. If you think something's wrong, it's likely wrong.
I see. Well, I'm afraid this is where we're going to have to wrap up the conversation today. But that was Robin Stern, co-founder and associate director of Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence, and David Smith, professor of philosophy at the University of New England. Thank you both so much today for your insights.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for elevating the topic. It's important.
And thank you to our viewers for tuning in today. We'll be back tomorrow at the same time here in South Korea. Till then, have a great day wherever you are. Goodbye.